5 Apache girls were left to die until the lone rancher appeared. The land stretched wide and unforgiving beneath the midday sun, a flat sea of dust and grass that seemed to go on forever. Elias Harper had ridden these plains for most of his life. He knew every rise and hollow, every place where the wind changed its voice. That was why the stillness ahead unsettled him. It wasn't the quiet of peace, it was the quiet that waited. As he crested a low ridge, his horse slowed on its own. Elias followed its gaze. 5 wooden posts stood in a rough line, planted deep into the hard earth. At first glance, they looked like nothing more than old fence markers. Then he saw the ropes, then the figures bound to them. 5 Apache girls. Their arms were tied high, bodies strained by hours under the sun. Dust clung to their skin. Their heads drooped with exhaustion, but they were alive, barely. Elias felt his breath catch as the meaning of the scene settled into him. This wasn't law. This wasn't justice. This was punishment meant to be watched, meant to break spirits as much as bodies. He reined in his horse and sat still, heart pounding. He knew what this meant. Somewhere nearby, men believed they had the right to decide who lived and who didn't. Men who would come back to see their work finished. Men who wouldn't take kindly to interference. Elias had survived the West by keeping his distance from trouble. He fixed fences, tended cattle, spoke when spoken to. He had learned that stepping in rarely ended clean. The smart choice, the safe choice, was to turn his horse and ride away. But one of the girls lifted her head. Their eyes met across the distance. There was fear in her gaze, yes, but there was something else too, a refusal, a quiet demand not to be erased. Elias dismounted. Each step toward the posts felt heavier than the last. The girls watched him closely now, unsure whether he was another threat or the last chance they would see. Ropes cut into their wrists, fibers darkened by sweat and dust. Elias kept his movements slow, deliberate, as if sudden motion might shatter what little balance remained. "You're not alone," he said quietly, unsure if his voice carried. One of the girls swallowed and nodded faintly. Another closed her eyes, as if holding on to the sound of a human voice after too much silence. Elias scanned the horizon, empty, no riders yet, but the plains had a way of hiding danger until it was close. Time was thin. He reached for his knife and felt the familiar weight of it in his hand. That simple motion made everything real. Cutting those ropes would mark him. There would be consequences. He knew that as surely as he knew the sun would set. He looked at the 5 faces before him, each carrying pain in a different way. Riding away would haunt him. Staying would change him. Elias stepped closer to the first post, lifted the blade, and made his choice. Elias began with the girl closest to him, the one whose eyes had met his first. Her arms trembled as she tried to hold herself upright, fingers numb from the rope biting into her wrists. The wooden post was rough, splintered from age, and the knots were tied tight, done by men who knew exactly how long suffering could be stretched. "I'm going to cut you down," Elias said softly, "but you'll need to trust me." She swallowed, then nodded once. Elias slipped his knife beneath the rope, careful to keep the blade away from her skin. The fibers resisted, thick and weathered. He worked slowly, sawing through with controlled movements. The moment the rope gave, her weight shifted. Elias braced himself and caught her, lowering her carefully to the ground. Her legs folded beneath her. She gasped, breath ragged, then steadied. Elias helped her sit, getting her back against the post. "Stay here," he said. "Don't try to stand yet." She looked up at him, eyes glassy but alert. "Thank you," she whispered. Elias moved to the second post. This girl was younger, her head bowed, hair tangled with dust. When he touched her shoulder, she flinched. "It's all right," he said quickly. "I'm here to help." She raised her head slowly. Fear gave way to disbelief, then to something like hope. Elias cut her free, catching her as her knees buckled. He guided her down beside the first girl, tearing a strip of cloth from his shirt to wrap around her wrists where the rope had rubbed raw. By the third post, sweat ran down Elias' back. He scanned the horizon again, still empty, still quiet, but the quiet felt thinner now, stretched tight like a wire. The third girl spoke as he worked. They said no one would come. Elias didn't stop cutting. They were wrong. She nodded, biting her lip as he lowered her. When she touched the ground, she pressed her forehead to the dirt, breathing deeply, as if grounding herself in being alive. The fourth rope was higher, the knot thicker. Elias climbed partway up the post, boots scraping wood. As he worked, a faint shape appeared far off, dust rising where the land met the sky. His chest tightened. Riders! He cut faster now, muscles straining. The rope snapped apart. He slid down, holding the girl close until her feet found the earth. She clung to his sleeve, trembling. Soon, she said. They're coming soon. I know, Elias replied. He moved to the final post. The fifth girl had not spoken yet. She watched him with calm intensity, as if memorizing his face. When he reached for the rope, she said quietly, If you must leave, leave after this. Elias met her gaze. I'm not leaving. The rope fell. He lowered her carefully, setting her among the others. 5 girls, alive, exhausted, free. The dust on the horizon grew thicker. Elias straightened, wiped his blade clean, and looked back toward the open plains. The rescue was over. The stand was about to begin. The sound of hooves reached them before the riders became clear, dull, rhythmic thunder rolling across the open plain. Elias turned toward the horizon, counting shapes through the haze of dust. At least 6 men, armed, riding hard. Can you walk? He asked the girls, his voice low but steady. 2 nodded immediately. 1 tried to stand and cried out as pain shot through her legs. Elias caught her before she fell. Slow, he said, you've been hanging too long. He helped arrange them behind the posts, where the thick wood offered a small measure of cover. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. He handed his rifle to the strongest-looking girl. Do you know how to use this? She hesitated, then nodded once. My father taught me. Good, only if you must. Elias stepped forward alone, placing himself between the approaching riders and the girls. The wind shifted, carrying voices now, laughter, confident and cruel. The riders slowed as they came closer, spreading out in a loose line. Their leader, a broad man with a red scarf around his neck, raised a hand. Well, I'll be damned, the man called. Looks like we got ourselves a hero. Elias didn't answer. The man's eyes flicked past him, noticing the empty ropes. His smile vanished. You cut them down. I did. You know what that means? The man asked, lifting his rifle slightly. It means you're going to turn around and leave, Elias said. Right now. Laughter rippled through the group. Just one rancher, another rider said, against all of us. Elias slowly cocked his rifle. Doesn't take many bullets to change the odds. The leader studied him more carefully now, his stance, his calm, the way he didn't rush. The silence stretched. Behind Elias, one of the girls whispered a prayer. A rider on the far right made a mistake. He nudged his horse forward, lifting his gun. Elias fired. The shot cracked across the plains. The rider screamed as he fell sideways, hitting the dirt hard. His horse bolted, reins flapping. Chaos erupted. 2 men raised their rifles. Another wheeled his horse around. Elias fired again, forcing them to scatter. He moved constantly, stepping left, then right, never staying still. Dust kicked up around his boots as bullets struck the ground where he'd been moments before. Run, Elias shouted over his shoulder. The girls didn't hesitate. Those who could walk helped the others, moving fast, low, away from the posts, and toward a shallow dip in the land Elias had noticed earlier. A bullet grazed Elias' arm, burning like fire. He gritted his teeth and kept firing, measured and controlled. One rider dropped his gun. Another ducked behind his horse. The leader cursed, trying to rally them, but confidence was gone now. This wasn't an execution anymore. It was a fight. One by one, the riders began to pull back, dragging their wounded, retreating under the relentless pressure of Elias' shots. Finally, the leader spat into the dirt. This isn't over, he shouted. Elias didn't reply. He watched until the riders disappeared into the haze, the sound of hooves fading into silence. Only then did his knees weaken. He turned toward the dip in the land. 5 figures waited there, alive, and watching him like he was something they had never expected to see. The shallow dip in the land became their refuge as the sun slid lower, painting the sky in streaks of orange and dust red. Elias kept watch from the edge, rifle resting across his knees, eyes scanning the endless plains. Every sound, wind through dry grass, the distant cry of a bird, made his muscles tense. The riders might return, men like that often did. Behind him, the 5 Apache girls sat close together. Their wrists were raw, skin torn where rope had bitten deep. One of them, taller than the rest, her dark hair braided tight despite the chaos, studied Elias with sharp, unblinking eyes. "You could have left," she said finally. Elias glanced back. "So could you, before today." She frowned. "We were captured 3 days ago." That explained the weakness, the dehydration. Elias nodded and reached into his saddlebag, pulling out a canteen and some dried meat. He passed them back carefully, making sure no one felt rushed or ashamed. "Small sips," he warned. "Your bodies aren't ready for more." The girls obeyed, though hunger shone in their eyes. The tall girl spoke again. "My name is Naylin." Elias tipped his hat slightly. "Elias Carter." Silence settled between them, heavy but not hostile. Finally, another girl broke down, her shoulders shaking as the fear she'd been holding back spilled free. Naylin wrapped an arm around her, whispering softly in Apache. The sound of the language, gentle, rhythmic, cut through the harshness of the day. As darkness crept in, Elias built a small fire, shielded by a ring of stones. He cleaned his wounded arm with water and cloth, ignoring the sting. The girls watched closely, alert, wary, but curious. "Why help us?" Naylin asked. Elias poked at the fire with a stick. "Because no one should die like that." "That's not enough," she said. He met her gaze. "It's all I've got." Later, as the fire burned low, Elias explained the land. His ranch lay 2 days south, near a dry creek that still held water in its deepest bend. There were patrols closer to the towns, but they weren't safe, not for Apache girls accused of crimes they never committed. "They'll hang us again," one girl whispered. Elias shook his head. "Not if I get you there." Sleep came in shifts. Elias took first watch, then second, then all of them. Each time his eyes drifted closed, images of ropes and crosses snapped them open again. Near dawn, a sound stirred him, the soft scrape of stone. Elias' hand went to his rifle. Naylin stood near him, holding a blade she must have hidden all along. She knelt and began cutting strips from her torn dress. "For your arm," she said quietly. Elias didn't stop her. When the sun rose, it found them moving. The girls leaned on each other, steps slow but determined. Elias walked point, scanning the horizon, his presence steady and unyielding. Behind them, the execution posts stood empty against the pale sky. Ahead lay danger, pursuit, and hard choices. But also something none of them had expected to find again. A chance. They traveled at a careful pace, following the folds of the land instead of the open flats. Elias chose shallow ravines and low ridges, places where the earth itself could hide them. The girls moved slowly, leaning on one another, their strength returning in uneven waves. Every step was an act of will. By midday, the heat returned with full force. Elias led them to a cluster of rocks where a thin line of shade offered brief relief. He checked their wrists and ankles, rewrapping cloth where swelling had grown worse. No one complained. Pain had become familiar, something to be endured rather than spoken aloud. Naylin watched him work. "You move like a man who expects trouble," she said. "I usually find it," Elias replied. They rested only long enough to drink and breathe. Then the wind changed. Elias felt it before he saw anything, a shift in pressure, a sense of being followed. He climbed a low rise and scanned the horizon, dust, far off but fresh. "They've picked up the trail," he said. Fear rippled through the group, quick and sharp. One of the girls whispered a prayer. Another clenched her jaw, eyes burning with anger. "We can't outrun horses," Nayland said. "No," Elias agreed, "but we can make them slow." He led them toward a narrow stretch of broken ground where rocks jutted out like teeth. There, he scattered their tracks, dragging branches, stepping backward, splitting paths. He showed the girls how to walk in shallow water where possible, how to step on stone instead of soil. Survival became a shared language. As the sun dipped low, they reached a shallow canyon, nothing like the deep ones farther west, but tight enough to force riders into single file. Elias positioned the girls behind a bend, out of sight, and climbed partway up the rocks to watch. The riders arrived just before dusk. They moved cautiously now, confidence stripped away by resistance. Elias counted 4 this time, fewer than before, still dangerous. The leader dismounted. Studying the ground, "He's close," the man muttered. Elias waited until they entered the narrowest point. Then he fired, not at men but at stone. The crack echoed, sharp and sudden. Horses reared, panicked by the sound and confined space. Another shot, dust and rock exploded near their feet. "Ambush!" someone shouted. Elias kept moving, never firing from the same place twice. He used echoes and shadows, letting the canyon do the work. The riders fired blindly, bullets sparking uselessly off stone. One horse broke free and bolted. Another rider cursed and followed. Fear spread faster than reason. Within minutes, the riders retreated the way they had come, shouting threats that rang hollow against the rock walls. Elias waited long after the sound of hooves faded. When he returned to the girls, their faces held something new, not just relief, but belief. "That was the last of them," Nayland said. "Maybe," Elias replied, "maybe not." But as night fell and the canyon held them in quiet, Elias allowed himself one small hope. They might actually make it. They reached the edge of Apache land just as the second night settled in. The ground changed first, grass giving way to stone Elias didn't recognize, paths worn not by cattle but by memory. Nayland felt it too. She straightened despite her exhaustion, her steps growing surer with every yard. "We are close," she said. Elias slowed his pace. This was as far as he intended to go. Beyond this line, he would be a guest where others were at home. He respected that. They stopped near a stand of low trees where the land dipped toward a hidden stream. The girls knelt, touching the earth, whispering words Elias did not understand but felt all the same. Relief washed over them, not loud, not sudden, but deep. "You'll be safe here," Elias said. Nayland turned to face him. In the firelight, the marks on her wrists were still visible, but her eyes were clear. "You gave us more than safety," she said. "You gave us back our names." One by one, the girls stepped forward. Some bowed their heads. One took his hand briefly, squeezing it with quiet gratitude. No speeches, no promises, just acknowledgement. Nayland was the last to approach. "The men who did this," she said, "they will tell stories, they will lie." Elias nodded. "They always do." "But there will be other stories too," she continued, "about a rancher who didn't look away." Elias exhaled slowly. "I didn't do this for stories." "I know," Nayland said. She smiled faintly. "That's why they'll last." From the trees came movement, figures stepping forward, careful but unafraid. Elders, watchers, family. The girls moved toward them, welcomed by soft voices and steady hands. The land seemed to breathe easier. Nayland paused once more and looked back. "If the West remembers anything," she said, "let it remember this." Then she turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving no sound behind. Elias stood alone for a long moment. The weight he'd been carrying finally loosened, replaced by something quieter, peace, maybe, or acceptance. He mounted his horse and rode back the way he'd come, following the stars. Years passed. People spoke of a lone rancher who changed after a certain summer, a man who refused to help with hangings, who tore down posts instead of building them. Some said 5 Apache girls lived because of him. Others said he was just tired of cruelty. Elias never argued either way. He worked his land, he helped when he could, and on quiet evenings, when the wind crossed the plains just right, he remembered 5 faces and the day the West chose mercy because one man chose to act.